And most importantly, they appear in the quiet decisions made every day that communicate one powerful truth. This connection is no longer being treated as something temporary, but as something worth building, protecting, and growing for the future. And that is where everything begins to change. Because when a man starts seeing someone as the one, his focus shifts from attraction to preservation. Attraction asks, how do I get closer? Preservation asks, how do I make sure I don't lose this? That difference is enormous. Many people experience attraction. Far fewer experience the feeling that they have found something genuinely rare. When that feeling appears, it creates a different level of emotional awareness. Suddenly, the relationship is no longer just about enjoyment. It becomes about value, and people protect what they value, not because they are instructed to, not because they feel obligated, because it happens naturally. Think about the things that matter most in our own life. You give them attention. You invest energy into them. You care about their well-being. Relationships work the same way. When someone becomes deeply significant, effort stops feeling like effort. It becomes a reflection of care. This is why a man who sees long-term potential often becomes more intentional. His actions become less random. His decisions become more thoughtful. He starts considering how his choices affect the relationship. And that consideration is a powerful sign because it reveals emotional investment. Emotionally invested people think beyond themselves. They begin asking different questions internally. How will this affect us? How will this impact the future? How will this influence the connection? Notice how different that is from someone who is only focused on the present moment. A person thinking short-term asks, what do I want right now? A person thinking long-term asks, what are we building? And when a man begins asking the second question, even subconsciously, his behavior starts reflecting it. Another sign appears in the way he handles opportunities. Many people assume commitment is demonstrated through grand declarations. In reality, commitment often reveals itself through choices. Life constantly presents alternatives, distractions, temptations, competing priorities. But when someone becomes emotionally significant, those alternatives lose some of their appeal. Not because other opportunities disappear, because the value of the connection becomes greater. This is an important psychological shift. Human beings naturally compare options, but when someone begins to feel irreplaceable, comparison starts fading. Attention becomes more focused. Energy becomes more directed, and that focus often becomes visible. He becomes more present, more attentive, more invested in shared experiences because he is no longer searching for possibilities. He is nurturing something he believes already has value. There is also something else that begins to happen. He starts paying attention to the little things, not the dramatic moments, the small ones. How your day went, what made you laugh, what stressed you out, what you are excited about, what matters to you this week. Why does this happen? Because emotional attachment increases emotional awareness. When someone matters deeply, the details of their life become meaningful, and meaningful details stay in memory. This is why a man who sees someone as the one often remembers things that surprise you. A casual comment made months ago, a goal you mentioned briefly, a challenge you were facing, a favorite place, a dream, a concern. These details matter because they represent attention, and attention is one of the purest forms of affection. People give their attention to what they value. The more emotionally invested someone becomes, the more naturally their attention follows. Another important sign is that he begins in more of his real world. Many people keep relationships compartmentalized in the early stages. Certain parts of life remain separate. Certain thoughts remain private. Certain experiences stay isolated. But when a man starts seeing someone as a permanent part of his future, those walls gradually begin coming down. He wants you to understand his world, his ambitions, his challenges, his values, his experiences, because long-term connection requires integration. It is difficult to build a future with someone who remains a stranger to important parts of your life. So he begins opening those doors, not necessarily all at once, but progressively. And every time he does, he is communicating trust. Trust is one of the strongest indicators of emotional significance because trust involves risk. Whenever we allow someone to see deeper parts of ourselves, we risk misunderstanding, rejection, or disappointment. Yet we do it anyway when the relationship feels valuable enough. That willingness reveals how important the connection has become. There is another sign that often goes unnoticed because it looks ordinary from the outside. He starts considering your perspective, not occasionally, consistently. This is a profound shift because it reflects emotional partnership. Instead of only thinking about his own preferences, he begins factoring in yours. Not because he has lost his identity, because he values yours. And healthy relationships thrive on this balance. Two people maintaining individuality while genuinely caring about each other's experiences. When a man sees someone as the one, he becomes more curious about how situations affect them, how decisions impact them, how experiences feel from their perspective. This level of empathy is difficult to fake because it emerges from genuine emotional care. And empathy creates connection. Connection creates trust. Trust creates attachment. Everything builds upon itself. There is also a deep and emotional shift is happening beneath the surface. The relationship begins influencing how he sees himself. This is something many people overlook. Meaningful relationships do not just affect how we feel about another person, they affect how we feel about ourselves. A strong connection often inspires growth. It motivates people to become better, not because they are being pressured, because they are inspired. When a man sees someone as the one, he often starts thinking more seriously about his future, his goals, his habits, his choices, his direction in life, because the relationship becomes connected to a larger vision. And when people see a meaningful future, they naturally become more intentional about who they are becoming. This is one reason healthy relationships can be so transformative. They encourage growth without demanding perfection. They inspire improvement without creating shame. And that inspiration is powerful. Another sign is how he reacts to your success. A man who sees someone as temporary may appreciate their achievements. A man who sees someone as the one often celebrates them, because your victories begin feeling meaningful to him. Your happiness creates happiness in him. Your progress becomes something he genuinely wants to support. Why? Because emotional attachment expands the sense of self. The relationship starts feeling like a team rather than two separate individuals moving in unrelated directions. And when people begin seeing themselves as a team, support becomes natural. Encouragement becomes natural. Celebration becomes natural. These behaviors reveal emotional investment in a way words sometimes cannot. Perhaps one of the strongest signs of all appears during uncertainty. Every relationship eventually encounters moments where things are not perfectly clear. Stress enters. Life becomes complicated. Unexpected challenges arise. And in those moments, someone's true level of investment often becomes ease visible. When a man sees someone as the one, uncertainty does not automatically push him away. Instead, it often motivates him to find solutions, to communicate, to understand, to work through difficulties, not because he enjoys conflict, because the relationship is worth protecting. That willingness matters, because meaningful relationships are not defined by the absence of problems. They are defined by the presence of commitment during problems. Anyone can stay when everything feels effortless. The deeper test is what happens when effort becomes necessary. And when someone genuinely sees a future with you, effort becomes a choice they are willing to make repeatedly. Over time, all of these signs begin forming a larger picture: the consistency, the attention, the vulnerability, the empathy, the support, the intentionality, the future-focused thinking. Individually, each sign matters. Together, they tell a story about someone whose feelings have moved beyond attraction and into emotional significance. Because when a man starts seeing someone as the one, he is not simply thinking about how that person fits into his life today. He is imagining how they fit into the life he hopes to build tomorrow. And once that vision begins taking shape in his mind, it quietly influences hundreds of decisions, conversations, priorities, and behaviors, revealing in countless subtle ways that what started as interest has evolved into something far deeper, far more meaningful, and far more difficult for him to hide. And once that vision begins taking shape in his mind, it quietly influences hundreds of decisions, conversations, priorities, and behaviors, revealing in countless subtle ways that what started as interest has evolved into something far deeper, far more meaningful, and far more difficult for him to hide. This is where many people misunderstand emotional attachment. They expect dramatic gestures to be the ultimate proof of someone's feelings. They look for huge declarations, grand romantic moments, or life-changing speeches. While those things can certainly be meaningful, the strongest signs are often much quieter. Real emotional attachment reveals itself in consistency over time. It shows up in the way someone continues choosing the relationship when the excitement of novelty begins to fade. It shows up in the way they remain engaged when life becomes busy. It shows up in the way they continue investing when there is nothing immediate to gain. Because genuine feelings are not me. assured by what someone does once. They are measured by what someone does repeatedly. When a man begins seeing someone as the one, repetition becomes important. The calls, the messages, the check-ins, the support, the effort. Not because he is following a formula, but because emotional investment naturally creates consistency. And consistency is one of the clearest forms of respect. People often talk about love as a feeling, but relationships survive because of behaviors. Feelings can fluctuate. Behavior reveals priorities. A man may have strong feelings for someone, but when he starts seeing a future with them, those feelings begin translating into action. That action often appears in the form of reliability. He becomes someone you can count on, not perfect, not flawless, but dependable. And dependability carries enormous emotional weight because it creates trust. Trust is built every time someone follows through, every time they keep their word, every time the why demonstrate that their actions align with their intentions. Over time, trust becomes one of the strongest foundations of emotional attachment. Without trust, even attraction feels unstable. With trust, connection becomes stronger and deeper. There is another interesting shift that happens when someone becomes truly important. A man begins paying attention not only to who you are today, but also to who you want to become. This is a sign many people miss. When someone is casually interested, they often focus on the present version of you. When someone sees long-term potential, they become interested in your future, your goals, your ambitions, your dreams, the things you want to achieve, the person you hope to become. Why? Because he is no longer viewing your life as separate from his own experience. He is beginning to imagine how your growth and happiness fit into a shared future. That perspective changes everything. Suddenly, your successes matter more, your struggle, ease matter more, your aspirations matter more. Not because he feels responsible for them, because he feels connected to them. And connection changes priorities. Another sign that often emerges is emotional patience. When people are only mildly invested, inconvenience feels larger. Misunderstandings feel easier to walk away from. Difficult conversations feel less worth having. But when someone genuinely values a relationship, patience increases. They become more willing to listen, more willing to understand, more willing to work through challenges. This does not mean accepting unhealthy behavior. It means recognizing the value of the connection and treating it accordingly. Psychologically, patience is often a reflection of investment. People become patient with things they believe are worth preserving. And relationships are no exception. The more valuable the connection becomes, the more effort someone is willing to make in order to protect it. There is also a fascinat, emotional shift related to vulnerability. At the beginning of most relationships, people naturally try to present their best selves. They highlight strengths. They minimize weaknesses. They focus on positive impressions. But when a man starts seeing someone as the one, maintaining a perfect image becomes less important than being genuinely known. This is where deeper vulnerability appears. He begins sharing things that are not always flattering: mistakes, regrets, insecurities, past disappointments, private fears, the parts of himself that do not always feel polished or impressive. Why does this happen? Because long-term connection requires authenticity. People can build attraction through image, but they build intimacy through truth. And intimacy becomes increasingly important when someone starts imagining a future together. There is another subtle sign that carries significant meaning. He seeks your opinion, not just occasionally, regularly. Your perspective. I've begun carrying more weight. Your thoughts influence decisions. Your feedback matters. This happens because respect and emotional attachment often grow together. When someone becomes deeply important, their viewpoint gains significance. Not because they always agree with you, but because your perspective becomes valuable to them. And value changes behavior. A person who values your perspective naturally becomes more interested in hearing it. This reflects a deeper level of emotional partnership. One of the strongest signs of all is the way he responds to your emotions. Many people can enjoy someone during moments of happiness. The real test appears during moments of difficulty, when you are frustrated, disappointed, stressed, uncertain. Emotionally invested people pay attention during these moments. They care about your emotional experience. They want to understand what you are going through. They want to support you when possible, not because they are trying to solve every problem, but because your well-being genuinely matters to them. And when someone's well-being becomes important, emotional attachment has often reached a much deeper level. This creates a powerful dynamic because emotional support builds trust. Trust builds intimacy. Intimacy builds connection, and connection strengthens attachment. Everything is interconnected. There is also a noticeable difference in how a man talks about the relationship itself. Someone focused on the short term often avoids discussions about the future. Not necessarily out of bad intentions, simply because they are not thinking that far ahead. But when a man starts seeing someone as the one, future conversations begin happening naturally, not forced, not rehearsed, natural. He references future experiences, future plans, future possibilities. The language changes because his mindset has changed, and language often reveals what is happening internally, what people repeatedly tar. LK about tends to reflect what occupies their minds. This is why future-oriented language can be such a meaningful indicator of emotional investment. It reflects vision, and vision reflects intention. Another important sign is that he becomes increasingly proud of the relationship, not in a possessive way, in an appreciative way. He values the connection. He appreciates what it adds to his life. He recognizes its importance. And because of that, he becomes more comfortable allowing it to be visible. Meaningful relationships become part of a person's identity, not their entire identity, but an important part of it. And when someone sees a relationship as meaningful, they stop treating it as something temporary or disposable. They start treating it as something significant, something worth nurturing, something worth protecting, something worth celebrating. Over time, all of these signs begin creating a larger pattern, a pattern that reveals a fundamental truth. When a man starts seeing someone as the one, his emotional world begins reorganizing itself around that realization. His attention shifts, his priorities shift, his behavior shifts, his thinking shifts, not because he has been forced to change, because genuine emotional significance naturally creates change. The relationship moves from being an experience he enjoys to being something he values deeply. And there is an important distinction between enjoyment and value. People enjoy many things. They protect what they value. They invest in what they value. They make sacrifices for what they value. They think long-term about what they value. And that is exactly why these signs become so difficult to hide, because they are no longer isolated actions. They are reflections of an internal transformation. A transformation that quietly influences how he listens, how he communicates, how he plans, how he supports, how he shows up, and how he imagines the future, until eventually the evidence becomes impossible to ignore, not through dramatic declarations or perfect words, but through the steady accumulation of choices that consistently reveal one simple reality. He no longer sees you as just someone important in his life, but as someone he cannot imagine building his best future without. Because he no longer sees you as just someone important in his life, but as someone he cannot imagine building his best future without. And that realization changes more than his behavior. It changes his mindset. When a man reaches the point where he begins seeing someone as an essential part of his future, he starts evaluating life differently. Decisions are no longer made in isolation. Experiences are no longer viewed through an entirely individual lens. There is a subtle but powerful shift from me to we. This transition does not happen overnight. It develops through trust, through shared experiences, through emotional safety, through countless moments that gradually convince him that this relationship offers something rare. One of the strongest indicators of this shift is the way he handles opportunities for connection. When someone matters deeply, connection stops feeling like an obligation and starts feeling like a priority. He wants to share experiences. He wants to. Create memories. He wants to include you in meaningful moments. This does not necessarily mean extravagant plans or dramatic gestures. Often, it appears in ordinary moments. A message about something that reminded him of you, a conversation he wants to have because he values your perspective, an experience he wants to share because your presence makes it more meaningful. These moments may seem simple, but they reveal something profound. People instinctively want to share meaningful experiences with those who matter most. That desire comes from emotional significance, and emotional significance creates attachment. Another sign appears in the way he reacts to distance. Distance has a unique ability to reveal the importance of a connection. When someone occupies a meaningful place in a person's emotional world, absence becomes noticeable, not because life stops, not because they become incapable of functioning, but because their presence has added value to everyday experience. Senses. This is why emotionally invested people often think about someone unexpectedly. A place reminds them of a conversation. A song triggers a memory. A random moment brings a smile because it is connected to a shared experience. These associations happen because the relationship has become integrated into daily life. And integration is one of the clearest signs that someone is becoming deeply attached. There is also a change in the way he views challenges. At the beginning of many relationships, Difficulties can feel like warning signs, reasons to pull away, reasons to question compatibility. But when someone starts seeing a future with you, challenges often become opportunities for understanding. Instead of asking, "Should I leave?" he begins asking, "How do we work through this?" That shift matters because every meaningful relationship eventually encounters obstacles. No connection is perfect. No two people agree on everything. No partnership exists without occurrence, or misunderstandings. The difference lies in how people respond. Someone who sees the relationship as temporary often looks for exits. Someone who sees the relationship as meaningful looks for solutions. This willingness to solve rather than escape reveals a deeper level of commitment. And commitment is one of the strongest signs that a man is beginning to see someone as the one. There is another emotional change that often goes unnoticed. He becomes more aware of your happiness, not in a controlling way, not in a people-pleasing way, but in a genuinely caring way. Your joy becomes important to him. Your excitement affects him. Your successes make him happy. This happens because emotional attachment naturally creates emotional investment. The well-being of someone we care about becomes personally meaningful. We celebrate their victories. We support them during challenges. We become emotionally connected to their experiences. And this connection creates a power, faux bond. Many people think love is primarily about receiving. In reality, one of the strongest signs of genuine attachment is the desire to contribute, to add value, to support, to encourage, to uplift. When a man begins seeing someone as the one, this desire often becomes increasingly visible. He wants to make life better, not because he is trying to earn affection, but because caring naturally motivates contribution. This leads to another important sign. He starts becoming more emotionally available. Many people confuse emotional availability with constant emotional expression. They are not the same thing. Emotional availability means being willing to engage emotionally, being willing to communicate, being willing to share, being willing to listen. When someone is emotionally unavailable, they often keep a significant distance between themselves and others. But when a man sees someone as deeply important, maintaining that distance becomes more difficult. The desire for connection begins outweighing the desire for protection. Gradually, he allows more of himself to be seen, not because he suddenly becomes fearless, because the relationship feels worth the risk. And that is what vulnerability truly is, not the absence of fear. The decision that something matters more than fear. This willingness to be emotionally seen is often one of the most meaningful signs of all. Because people do not expose their hearts to everyone. They do it selectively, carefully, and usually only when someone has earned a special place in their lives. There is also a growing sense of responsibility. Not responsibility in the sense of obligation, responsibility in the sense of care. He becomes more mindful of his actions, more aware of his impact, more thoughtful about how he communicates, because he recognizes that what happens between you matters. This awareness often leads to greater intentionality. Intentionality is powerful because it separates assual interest from serious investment. Casual interest drifts. Intentionality directs. A man who sees someone as the one begins directing effort toward the relationship. Not perfectly, not constantly, but consistently. And consistency always speaks louder than intensity. Intensity can create excitement. Consistency creates trust. Trust creates security. Security creates emotional freedom. And emotional freedom allows love to grow. One of the most beautiful signs of deep emotional attachment is that he begins appreciating qualities that have nothing to do with attraction. At first, people often notice appearance, charm, humor, or chemistry. But as feelings deepen, different qualities become important. Character, values, integrity, kindness, resilience, the way you handle challenges, the way you treat people, the way you approach life. These qualities become increasingly attractive because they reveal who you truly are. And when a man starts seeing someone as a long-term partner, who they are becomes more important than how they appear. This is a significant psychological shift because sustainable love is built on character. Character creates trust. Character creates respect. Character creates admiration. And admiration is a critical component of long-term emotional attachment. People rarely sustain deep feelings for someone they do not respect. Respect deepens connection. It strengthens attraction. It reinforces commitment. And when admiration and affection begin working together, the relationship reaches a different level. There is also a subtle confidence that often emerges. When a man starts seeing someone as the one, he becomes more certain about the value of the relationship. That certainty affects his behavior. He becomes less focused on games, less interested in creating unnecessary uncertainty, less concerned with maintaining emotional distance, because clarity becomes more valuable than ambiguity. People who want a future with someone generally seek greater understanding, not greater confusion. They want connection, not unnecessary complications. And that desire often reveals itself through honest communication, through effort, through presence, through reliability, all the qualities that build meaningful relationships over time. Ultimately, what makes these signs so powerful is that they are difficult to fake consistently. Anyone can perform for a day. Anyone can say the right words once. Anyone can create a good impression in a single moment, but genuine emotional attachment reveals itself over time. In patterns, in habits, in repeated choices, in the countless small actions that demonstrate care, attention, respect, and investment. That is why the clearest signs are often not dramatic. They are steady, reliable, consistent. They appear in the way he prioritizes the relationship, the way he includes you in his future, the way he values your happiness, the way he communicates during difficult moments, the way he remains present when life becomes complicated, the way he continues choosing the connection again and again, even when doing so requires patience, effort, and vulnerability, because somewhere along the way he stopped seeing the relationship as one possibility among many and started seeing it as something uniquely valuable, something worth protecting, something worth investing in, and something that has become inseparable from the vision of the future he hopes to create.